It was a night like any other in the small tech-dependent city. People were in their homes, the streets were empty, and the sky was overcast. But in a specific moment, everything changed. At exactly 2:47 a.m., the electricity went out across the entire city. There were no flashes or warnings, just pitch darkness. People started hearing strange noises, sounds of cracking and static, like a radio when it's not tuned to a station. But these sounds weren't coming from a radio. They were coming from everywhere around them. People started waking up from their sleep, confused and frightened by the sudden blackout. Some people assumed it was just a momentary outage and waited for the lights to come back on. However, as minutes turned into hours and the darkness deepened, panic began to spread. People started venturing out into the streets, carrying candles and lanterns, exchanging looks filled with concern and fear, their faces pale in the dim light, reflecting the uncertainty that clouded their minds. They roamed the deserted streets, calling out to their neighbors, trying to make sense of what had happened. Each passing moment without answers only fueled their fear, making the darkness seem more ominous and the silence more deafening. Chapter 1. The first moment. At first, people thought it was just a regular power outage, but they soon realized that something stranger was happening. Mobile phones weren't working, the internet was down, and even the traffic lights were out. The entire city was isolated from the outside world. No one could contact emergency services or get help from anyone. People tried calling their family and friends, but all they got was a busy signal. Cars were abandoned on the streets, their engines idling, unable to move without electricity. The absence of light made the city seem alien. People struggled to recognize their surroundings in the darkness, stumbling over obstacles they knew so well in the daylight. Street lamps stood like silent sentinels, their glow replaced by the cold, uninviting gleam of their glass globes. Buildings loomed closer, their shadows stretching long and distorted in the flickering candlelight. People began to gather in small groups, sharing stories and rumors that only added to the growing sense of unease. Some spoke of similar events that had happened in other parts of the country, while others shared tales of strange occurrences they'd witnessed since the lights went out. The darkness seemed to amplify their fears, making every shadow appear menacing, every rustle of leaves sound like footsteps. Chapter 2. Strange phenomena. As hours passed, strange phenomena started to appear. People reported seeing shadows moving in the streets and strange noises coming from unknown places. Some claimed to have seen ghosts appearing in old houses, while others spoke of hearing whispers coming from the walls. A low growl echoed through the empty streets, sending shivers down people's spines. They described seeing apparitions moving in and out of the darkness, their forms indistinct and their movements unsettling. These sightings were sporadic, fleeting glimpses of what appeared to be shadowy figures moving with an unnatural grace. Some claimed the shadows seemed to be reaching for them, their touch bringing an icy chill that had nothing to do with the night's growing coldness. As the night wore on, the whispers grew louder, seeping into people's dreams and tainting their waking moments. It was as if the city itself was trying to communicate, its voice a mournful lament carried on the wind. Every crack in the walls, every creak in the trees seemed to carry secrets that were best left buried in the darkness. People started to feel fear, not just from the darkness but from the things that couldn't be explained. This wasn't just a power outage. It was becoming a nightmare from which there seemed to be no awakening. Why did the electricity go out in the first place? What was happening in the city? And most importantly, how could they survive this ordeal? Chapter 3. The search for truth. People started looking for answers, but no one knew what was going on. Some believed it was a cyber attack, others a natural disaster. Rumors spread like wildfire, adding to the chaos and confusion. As dawn began to break, casting a faint, sickly light over the horizon, people started to disperse, returning to their homes, each person lost in their own thoughts. The absence of electricity had stripped away the city's familiar landmarks, leaving them vulnerable and afraid in a landscape they no longer recognized. The day wore on, each hour stretching into an eternity. People rationed their food and water, trying to make their supplies last as long as possible. Days turned into weeks, then months, and still there was no sign of the electricity coming back on. The city became a ghost town. One day, some young people started gathering in the city center, trying to figure out what was happening. They discussed different theories, from cyber attacks to unknown natural phenomena. They searched for a logical explanation, something that could bring them a shred of comfort in their new reality. Some suggested it was a punishment for their past mistakes, a consequence of their society's sins. Others saw it as a test, a challenge from an unseen force to see if humanity would prevail. As they talked, they started to remember what it was like to live without technology. They told stories about a time before smartphones, when people used to read books and play board games. They recalled the simplicity of handwritten letters and the warmth of face-to-face conversations. But the more they talked, the more they felt helpless and scared. Meanwhile, some residents noticed that some places in the city weren't affected by the outage. Some old houses and abandoned buildings were lit as if they had their own power source. These structures, once ignored and forgotten, now stood out as beacons of light in the encroaching darkness. Curiosity mixed with desperation led people to investigate further. They crept closer, trying to peer through windows, their eyes straining to pierce the gloom. But whatever was happening inside those houses, it was concealed from view. It was almost as if the buildings themselves were hiding their secrets. The knowledge that there were places unaffected by the blackout only heightened their fear and desperation. It created a sense of mystery and intrigue that played havoc with their already frayed nerves. Chapter 4. The discovery. A group of the bravest youths decided to explore one of these old houses. They entered the house cautiously, carrying candles and non-functional mobile phones. They moved from room to room, their voices echoing eerily in the stillness. Each step they took seemed to amplify the silence, making the darkness feel heavier, more oppressive. Then suddenly, they heard a sound coming from the upper floor. It was a faint sound, but it seemed to be saying something. They couldn't quite make out the words, but the tone was grave, filled with an urgency that sent shivers down their spines. With a mix of apprehension and morbid curiosity, they ascended the creaking staircase. At the top of the stairs, they found a closed room. Hesitantly, they pushed open the door, revealing an interior that seemed to glow with an eerie light. Chapter 5. The end room was filled with strange symbols and marks on the walls, like ancient hieroglyphs. In the center of the room there was an old keyboard, and on the screen there was a single sentence: Earth disconnected. The air in the room was thick with anticipation, heavy with the weight of whatever secret it held. They looked at each other, their faces illuminated by the screen's eerie glow. Their silence was broken only by the hum of the keyboard and the pounding of their hearts. Suddenly, the lights in the entire house went out and they found themselves in total darkness. The voice they had heard before was now clear, booming through the room. Now, you will be with us forever. They ran out of the house, back into the familiar darkness of the street, but the discovery they had made had changed them. They knew now that they weren't alone in this. They were being watched, studied, perhaps even manipulated by an entity beyond their understanding. The city seemed to sigh, its buildings pressing closer, its streets narrowing. The familiar landscape was twisted into something menacing, something that reflected their own growing fears. As the night deepened, they understood that this was only the beginning. Their lives as they had known them were over. They were now part of something larger, darker, something they couldn't begin to comprehend. And as the darkness enveloped them, they knew one thing for certain: they would never be the same again. They had dared to seek the truth, and now the truth had found them. And so the story ends with them exploring the city, trying to find a way out of this nightmare. Will they find the answers they seek? Will they escape this strange phenomena? Or are they destined to be trapped forever? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain: they will never forget that night when the earth disconnected.